Hello, thank you for joining. I'm Denise Clare, Director of Compliance here at Compass, and this is Need to Know, our Webisode series where we navigate through the latest industry news, cut out the noise, and get to the good stuff. In today's Webisode, we are joined by special guests to help us learn more about a few of the important changes from the Secure 2.0 bill. This huge piece of legislation contains more than 90 provisions, and we are still waiting for additional guidance and comments from the IRS and the Department on Labor on a lot of them. In today's webisode, we will discuss long-term part-time employees, mandatory auto enrollment with auto increase for new plans. Also going to discuss pension-linked emergency savings accounts, Roth election for employer contributions, and finally, self-certification of hardship withdrawals. Our special guest today is a partner at Ferenczy Benefits Law Center in Atlanta, Georgia. She is in the midst of a hurricane right now, so hopefully her power stays on and we can get through this. She advises clients on many issues related to qualified retirement plans, including design, mergers and acquisitions, audits, and operational issues. She has spoken nationally at industry events on audit and correction issues. She's a fantastic ERISA attorney and one of our favorite people. Please welcome Alison Cohen. Alison, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you with us. There's a
Thank you,
lot to get to.
Denise. Yeah,
You're
my
welcome.
house has not been swept or blown away, so we're gonna go with that as our victory lap. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. There's a lot to get to today, so we're going to jump right in. And as always, if you have questions that are specific to your business or your plan, please reach out to Compass after the webisode. We're here to help. So, Alison, our first topic today is long-term part-time employees. Can you explain who falls into the category of a long-term part-time employee and what we may have learned since the last time we spoke about this topic?
Well, what we have learned about this topic is that it is going to be the number one audit problem next year during the 2024 audits. We're also predicting that it is going to be probably the number one or number two corrective item that's going to need attention, because the reality is nobody is going to be doing it correctly, or very few plan sponsors, and it's not their fault. We're going to blame the government because that's always fun. The point of this legislation, when it first came out in Secure 1, which goes all the way back to December of 2019, is there was concern that gig workers who never quite make that 1 year, 1,000 hours didn't have an opportunity to save for retirement. And so Congress, in its wisdom, insert your favorite joke there, decided to include legislation that said, if you have workers that work 500 hours in a row, great, 500 hours a year, and they do that for 3 years in a row, we have to let them defer. They don't have to get employer money, but they have to at least be able to put away for, 401k money. That was slated to take effect as of January of this year. The problem is that the IRS did not bother to give us guidance until after Thanksgiving last year. So they gave us roughly 33, 34 days to take what guidance they gave, digest it, try to explain it to the, million plus employers that are out there with retirement plans, and fully implement by January 1st. That was a ridiculous task. And as with most guidance, the IRS was incomplete in the guidance they provided. So in the midst of all of this, Congress, rather than waiting to sort of see how it played out like a normal group of people might, they decided to jump in, and December of 2022 with Secure 2.0 said, oh, no, we're going to modify it. So you don't even know the rules yet. You don't have your guidance yet, but we're telling you we're already going to change the rules. So in 2025, you have to totally change how you're doing stuff again. So people haven't even had a chance to come to terms with 2024. They're going to have to switch gears, and instead of 3 years, it's going to be 2 years for 2025. It's a mess. It's a big mess. There are some really important issues that were not addressed in the guidance. If you have a plan that is potentially an off calendar year plan, and depending on how you define your year of service for plan purposes, instead of a January 1st start date, you may actually have already had long-term part-time employees that should have entered your plan in the summer of 2023, months before we got the guidance explaining that you might have employees that were already long-term. So you might have like failed out of the gate before you even had a chance to try to comply. That's one of the many items we're trying to get clarified. Our firm wrote what's called a comment letter, which is a polite way of saying things that we're complaining about to the IRS that they need to fix. We filed a comment letter, and one of the key things that we asked for is that because of the chaos surrounding the implementation of this new law, that the IRS issue what I like to call an amnesty program. And similar to automatic enrollment, which we're going to talk about next, the program would look exactly like what they do for automatic enrollment today, which is they give plan sponsors until 9.5 months following the end of a plan year to catch a mistake. And then if they did make a mistake, there isn't any sort of a corrective contribution. So there's no financial penalty for making a mistake with the long-term part-time. I think it's the only reasonable thing that can be done. I certainly hope the IRS takes that into consideration. Look, all they have to do is copy, paste, and change a couple of section references. It cannot be that hard. So fingers crossed, we're going to get a little bit more guidance. But in the meantime, if employers have not saddled up yet with long-term part-time for 2024, when they start collecting their census data this coming quarter, getting ready to test for 2024, there should be an eye towards, do we have people on our census that are below that 1,000 hours? If your plan does not have 1 year 1,000 hours as your eligibility, ignore everything I just said. This is not going to apply to you because you're already letting those people into your plan because you have a 3-month service or a 6-month service. So you may have discussions with your TPA this year that you haven't had before. Compass is going to walk you through if there's changes that need to be made to your document or your eligibility. And if mistakes are found, don't worry. There's solutions that are, we hope, coming that are going to make it a painless situation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, we've been addressing that a lot and trying to tackle that with clients on a case-by-case basis and try to give those that need it a heads up that likely you have these type of people in your accounts. Our next topic is mandatory automatic enrollment with auto increase for new plans. We get a lot of questions about this topic, especially since it's coming up effective 1/1/25. Can you tell us some more about this rule?
What's interesting is it's effective 1/1/2025, but technically it was effective as of the enactment date of Secure 2.0, which again, really poor drafting by Congress. Really poor drafting by Congress because I don't think they meant what they wrote. But because they wrote it the way they wrote it, the IRS has released guidance saying, well, this is how Congress wrote it, so this is how we should do it. And what that means is that if you started a retirement plan after December 29th, 2022, which is the date that the Secure Act was enacted, you are required as of 1/1/2025, if you haven't already done so, to put automatic enrollment in your plan. And not just any automatic enrollment. It has to be the eligible automatic contribution arrangement. You're going to hear ECA. You're going to hear IACA. I will let you choose as to which acronym and pronunciation you prefer. What are you, Denise? Are you an ECA or an ACA? Which team are you?
I am IACA. I am IACA.
Okay, she is team IACA. You decide. I'm an ECA girl. I got to tell you, I've always pronounced it ECA. So what that means is, and when I say new plan, we got guidance from the IRS defining what counts as a new plan. And there's a new vernacular now where we call things grandfathered plans. So if your plan is a grandfathered plan, you don't have to worry about any of this. To be a grandfathered plan, you had to have a 401k provision in place prior to that December of 22 date. So let's say I am company A and I used to participate in company B's plan because we were one big entity. We were control group. We had the same common ownership. We now break apart because the ownership has changed, and now company A wants to leave company B and start their own plan. Your service providers like Compass are going to have discussions with you because depending on how you do that splitting up of the old plan, you may or may not be able to retain that grandfathered status and avoid automatic enrollment. Similarly, if you're in the middle of an acquisition and one company is buying another company, when you merge plans together, there are going to be considerations as to is one of the plans grandfathered or not. And then in order to preserve everybody's grandfathered status, we may want to make sure we're moving quickly on that. So we do it within a 2-year window, what we call the transition period in our vernacular, because we don't want to have to do automatic enrollment. So there are ways of avoiding it. Some of the open questions. Why do I have to have automatic enrollment? Congress has looked at the data and has said automatic enrollment is critical to get Americans to save enough for retirement. They firmly believe in automatic enrollment. Statistics show it is an extremely helpful tool. But operationally, it's a pain in the butt to administer. And so a lot of people would rather not do it. If you are not in the mandatory category, I'm going to tell you this right now and burst your bubble right up front. Coming down the road at some point, not next year, but maybe 2026, they are going to eventually pass a law making it mandatory in all 401k plans. So it is something that is going to come at some point. And as industry leaders like Compass, they're going to have to be prepared to support all of their clients in this new type of world because they've made it clear that's where they're going. So if, however, here's where things get murky, and I don't want to overdo for purposes of this discussion. If you were part of a multiple employer plan or a MEP or a pooled employer plan, which we call a PEP, there is a huge gray area now about if I join that PEP and that PEP is not grandfathered, but I was grandfathered, do I lose my status or not? There are some rules about spinning out from MEPs and PEPs as well that was grandfathered. So you need to talk to a service provider if you're considering or have been involved in a MEP or a PEP, because those rules are exceptionally gray. If it's too regular, just employer plans that it's a direct sponsorship, the rules are very, very clear. You're going to have automatic enrollment. You're going to have an auto increase. An auto increase means that you start someone, let's say, at 4% of their auto enroll. Every year, you have to bump them up another 1%, 1%, 1%, up to 10%. Okay. So the goal is, it used to be that you would auto enroll somebody at 1 or 2% and leave it alone. 1 or 2% is not going to get people to a healthy retirement balance. So they want people up closer to 10% because that's more realistic to get you where you need to go financially. But it's hard to keep track, and you really, as a plan sponsor, are going to have to partner with the right vendors to support you in keeping track of all that.
Awesome. Thank
Denise,
you.
are you excited about auto enroll? Because we're coming up in notice season. So auto enrollment also requires annual
We
notices.
have already reached out to our plans who are in and are in the process of updating the record keepers. So we are ahead of the game. So if you are in that boat, we have already reached out to you and are making the proper amendments and adjustments to your plan. So yes, we're having fun.
It's
Our
not
next
for
topic,
everybody, man, but we like what we do.
it is. You have to be a particular kind of person to do this work. Our next topic is pension linked emergency savings account, which I also has an acronym, which I believe we go with PLESA. Are we mutual on that?
PLESA, it is. Ding, 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 ding. We agree. It is PLESA. I don't think it's PLESAs. I think PLESA is it because emergency is PLESA. This is both a blessing and a curse. The concept was really good, and then it got completely mucked up in the
Yes.
guidance and how they want us to execute it. So we took a very clean idea and we added all kinds of strange battle armor to it, and now it's this hideous beast that nobody is going to want to touch. Especially because there is a second alternative, which is not on the agenda, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So a PLESA is you allow your employees to have a separate account inside of the 401k that they can contribute to, that is a special bucket of after tax money. So it goes in as Roth, and it is earmarked for any type of emergency they may have. So if, for example, I had a pipe in my wall that started leaking in the middle of a hurricane, because that's fun. So I had to have somebody come in, cut a hole in my wall this morning, fix the pipe, and now I have to have somebody come who actually knows drywall skills, and they're going to have to repair the hole in my wall. That's, when you add it all up, okay, that's going to be like $750. I was not expecting on spending. But what are you going to do? Have water leak through your wall? And no. If I had a PLESA account, I could merely just tap my employer and say, yep, I'm taking a withdrawal of the PLESA of $750. I don't have to explain the emergency. I don't have to justify the emergency. There's no taxes on the withdrawal because it's already after tax. There's no penalties on it. And if I withdraw 4 times a year and no more than 4 times a year, I cannot be charged to get access to my money. So great, there's a lot of opportunities here. But now there's also a lot of stressful things to it, like how does it interact with the employer matching contributions? And what happens if I go over the certain threshold? And only non-highly compensated can have it, not highly compensated. And so now I have to track people differently in my payroll system. And like I said, it has to go to a separate bucket, and that bucket has to be monitored. And it became very complicated. If you want to help your employees because you have a population that can't just afford to fix a leaky pipe in a wall, that they really do live paycheck to paycheck, and a pipe issue like this will cause them not to be able to pay their rent. If you have that population, there is a second emergency hardship withdrawal that is available that can be added to your plan. That's a lot easier to administer. It's basically, we're just going to take money out of up to $1,000, so the limits are lower, but it's faster, cleaner, easier. They can tap the $1,000 and then that's it. There's a time period where they won't be able to tap it again. So it is one and done unless you pay it back. Super easy to manage. Doesn't affect your testing, doesn't affect your matching contributions. That might be an alternative that might fit for your population. It's worth having a discussion with your Compass representative if, again, you have that type of population that you worry, hey, they blew out tires on the way to work because somebody dropped a pail of nails. That happens here in Georgia. This is the only place I know that has more nails on the road any place else I've ever lived. That'll set you back $500-600. So it's something worth talking about. Denise, I don't know if you're getting a lot of conversations with your clients on this, if there seems to be interest or no.
I haven't heard a lot about really any of the emergency withdrawal situations, but yeah, the PLESA seems really hard to administer. And I think certainly the emergency hardship withdrawal seems the easier way to go with that population of people.
Yeah, a lot of record keepers and payroll vendors are not even equipped yet or set up to be able to fully take on the PLESA. So,
yeah, even earnings, the whole thing, it blows my mind. Like, so
yeah,
let's do the next
it is
topic.
complicated. Yeah, if you're interested, there are articles on our website that explain all the details about this. We publish a news article at Ferenczy Flash So if you're interested in reading about any of these topics and you're that kind of a nerd, please, by all means, you're welcome to do some research on those. It's not too much of a painful read.
No, it's great. Yeah, your articles are amazing. I read them all the time. But our next topic, which is very popular, lots of chatter around having employer contributions, the participants having the election to have those paid as Roth. I know the record keepers are programming for this. What are some other things that we need to know about
Well,
employer money
the
as Roth?
reason that it was delayed out of the gate, so this is another one that Congress did not think through. When they passed Secure 2.0, they're like, awesome, this can be effective as of the enactment date. Nobody realized, like, wow, we need to build this thing. We need to figure out how it's going to work. How are we going to calculate it? How is it going to be taxed? Because if you think about it, an employer that wants to make a 2023 employer contribution is often not going to make that contribution until, today, because their tax filing deadline might be October 15th, and this is when they're going to figure out their financials. So how am I supposed to file my taxes? And how do I make the election? So I make the election in 23, but I file my taxes in April, but I don't know what I'm getting yet. And now it's supposed to. So there were issues. How are we going to tax this money? Does the employer be able to take the deduction the same way? Those were big questions, because I'm putting it in as this part is pre-tax, but that's after tax. Does it affect the employer's deductibility? And the answer is no. That we do know. How does it show up? Should the employer put it on the W-2? Should the employer put it on a 1099? Like, how are we going to report it? Because it's taxable income. And for what tax year does the employee have to report it? And the challenge is the IRS hasn't given us guidance on this yet. But the weird thing is, what the IRS has given us guidance on is the IRS gave us guidance on doing Roth employer contributions in a SEP or a simple. So they haven't given us guidance on doing it within a 401k, which should be, way more common. But they gave us guidance on SEPs and simples. In theory, what record keepers are doing is saying they're not going to change the rules compared to what they did for the SEP and the simple for the 401k. So even though we don't have a lot of guidance yet, we're just going to assume that the IRS is really boring and dull and they're going to use the same rules. So we now know the answer is it is going to be reported on your 1099. So employees are going to have to get a 1099. We know that it's going to be taxable to employees in the year in which it's funded, not the plan year in which it is for, if they stay true to the simple rules. So I fund in 24, even though it's a 23 contribution as an employee, I will declare that. I will get a 1099 to declare it on my 24 taxes. So we do know certain things. We know with the SEPs and the simples that employees have to declare that election in advance. So they still have to declare it before it is funded, but how far before it is funded? Do they have to declare it at the end of 23 if they want it for 24? We're not entirely sure. It appears that they might be able to declare it just prior to it being funded. So then that's going to add a whole layer of administrative burden. So the employer is going to have to give themselves enough time, if they want to do this, to say to the employees, okay, we are going to fund our discretionary match or our discretionary profit sharing. You have to make an election. We're going to give you 1 week, 2 weeks. I don't know how long we have to give people before you decide how you want it done. Then we actually go ahead and fund it. So Denise, I'm sure you have the same clients that I have that wait until, if the deadline is October 15th, they try to fund it on October 14th.
Yep.
They make the decision at that last minute. I don't know how you're going to be able to make a decision at that last minute if you're trying to also get an employee to give an election beforehand. The other alternative is you collect the election even though you may not fund the contribution. You just may randomly have to make an election and keep them just in case, and keep them every year. We don't know if we think it has to be done annually, or can I have a perma election where until the end of time, just make them all Roth until I tell you otherwise? That's been part of the challenge. So even though on paper I legally could have done it, going back to the enactment of Secure 2.0, with all these questions hanging over our heads, it just has not been practical to be able to implement.
And does it also apply to safe harbor contributions? Can the same rule apply to safe harbor money?
It would apply to all, yes, it would apply to all employer contributions. And then, okay, well, what if it's a per payroll employer contribution, not the annual? Can they elect at the beginning of the year and then like change their minds and then change their minds again? And is the employer allowed to restrict how many different times they can flip flop between I want it regular pre-tax, I want it Roth? What can we do with that? We don't know. So again, it's operationally very challenging, even though it seems like a simple concept.
Not to mention the surprise tax bill to the participant at the end of the year because they didn't pay taxes throughout like they would on their normal Roth deferrals.
Yes, that will definitely come as a surprise for people who don't fully understand it, and then they get this, interesting tax bill. So I think it's going to be a lot of education, but we can't even really do that until we get the rest of the guidance. We only got, like I said, through simples and SEPs, a little bit of guidance. There's still too many questions that need to be answered on the rest.
It's a common answer. We're waiting for the IRS.
We're waiting. We're waiting.
The last topic today is self-certification of hardships. What do plan sponsors who are thinking about permitting this have to think about?
Here's the great news. I'm not waiting on guidance. I actually can give you answers on this one. And it really has to do with your employee population and how well you understand your employees. Because I can tell you from what I've been talking with my clients, there's some that are like, look, if my employee wants to lie and claim a hardship and take their retirement money out, I'm going to restrict it to their deferrals only. I'm not going to let them take the employer money. So that may require an amendment to the plan. And they're shooting themselves in the foot, and I don't care. And then I have other employers that are like, no, the whole reason I am spending time and money on having a retirement plan is I want my employees to be able to afford to retire. And they can't do that if they keep dipping in it for reasons and lying on forms. And then there's also the other side of that coin, which is, why would I want employees working for me that I know are lying to me? If they're lying to me about a hardship form, what else are they lying to me about? And is that the employee population? So rather than even sowing the seeds of mistrust, there are still employers that say, as administratively easy as this self-certification thing is, I would still rather force an approval on the hardships so that I don't even start sowing those seeds of distrust. They just emotionally feel better that way.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
But it's up to them.
Yep, it is. It is. And the self-certifying, I guess for the most part, that's going to take place on the record keeper side of things because most distributions are initiated online. So I guess we're waiting for some of the record keepers to build that kind of documentation into the application.
And it's not a whole lot of documentation. That's why most of them, it's already up and online, and they're already starting to try to default employers there. And employers don't realize the impact of being defaulted that way, because the employee goes on and goes, yep, I buried my grandmother for the 6th time. And this is how much money it cost me. And I don't have to prove a thing. And I just, sign off on a penalty of perjury that, yep, this is truly, I'm burying grandma 6 times. They don't care. They take their money. And, I think if employers start seeing a pattern, they may pull back on the self-certification. They may realize that it's being abused and, yank back the reins. So I would not be surprised if the pendulum swings and there's more clients that are opting out of self-certification over the coming years once they see the stats of how employees might be abusing it.
Right. Awesome. Well, this has been super informative. We're running up against our time. Alison, we so greatly appreciate your time today, enlightening about us all these provisions and your insights about them. I found it super informative, and I hope everybody else did as well. Thanks to the rest of you for spending time with us today. If you have any questions that come up that we haven't been able to address today, because obviously we didn't have a lot of time for Q&A today, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer them, and we'll get back to all of you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.